Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today I'm joined by Reza Oliyai, President and CEO of OCC, Oliyai Consulting Corporation, which he founded in 2022 after 3 decades working in pharma research, development and commercialization, including as SVP of Pharma and Biologics Operations at Gilead. His company provides scientific and technical solutions to accelerate preclinical and clinical drug development from early stages all the way through to commercialization, and has an expert network of scientific, technical and operational consultants with experience across all modalities. Reza, welcome to the podcast today.
Look, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and many thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and it's going to be great. Thank you.
Likewise, great to have you here. So to begin with then, I mentioned some of your background there at Gilead and then founding OCC. It'd be great to hear from you about that experience and what led you to forming the consulting practice.
Sure, great. Yeah, I was extremely fortunate to work at Gilead Sciences. So I joined Gilead in 1994 and I left in 2022. So I basically spent 28 years at Gilead. I sat at the same desk doing a different job year after year. So my organization grew as Gilead's organization also grew. In my last role, I was SVP of Pharmaceutical and Biologics Operations, where I managed a group of about 1,700 people at 7 different sites. Wow. And so those include biologics, ADCs, small molecules, long-acting injectables, liposomal, sterile manufacturing. So I had a pretty large scope of roles and responsibilities. And I also had responsibility for commercial products, all regions, excluding cell therapy that reported through a different organization at Kite. I opened my own consulting company 3 years ago. It was almost an accident that I opened this consulting company. After I stepped away from Gilead, people reached out to me, wanted me to consult for them, especially a number of VCs locally in the Bay Area. So I just happened to update my LinkedIn profile saying that I've opened a consulting company, and clients basically start rushing in. And over time it grew. Today, I believe I counted this morning, we have more than 115 clients globally. Okay. And there are more than 130 subject matter experts that work with us. So we've grown significantly. And the reason for our growth is we have deep technical expertise at every node of supply chain. So we provide technical CMC support, operational CMC support. We have deep expertise on regulatory CMCs. We help many of our clients with INDs, INPDs, NDAs, BLAs, and we also provide CGMP support either as a QP or as a QA. So we basically handle every node of the supply chain. And if you look at the portfolio of the programs that we have, is about 50% small molecules, or we call them synthetic because that includes siRNAs and peptides. And the other 50% are biologics and ADCs. Okay. So that's the ratio that we have.
That's over a pretty short period of time there, Reza, to build this network and as many clients as you have. What do you put that down to? The consulting space, from an outside perspective, looks fairly crowded, fairly well served. What's the secret sauce behind that growth?
Well, I don't know about a secret sauce, but what we try to do is create value for our clients. And we don't do any business development at all. So clients come to us all by word of mouth. We basically don't reach out to clients. They reach out to us to a great extent. And people know of our reputation, and our growth has been all organic through simple word of mouth and people reaching out. That's like the secret sauce is to create value for clients, and more clients will come. And we really focus on making sure clients are doing the right thing at a phase appropriate manner. So we would never want to be in a situation where we're creating more work for the client. So our business model is very simple. We're not about billing hours. We're all about creating value for clients. I think that has been the key to our success.
Presumably that means that everything is very milestone focused and making sure it's the right service at the right time.
Exactly. Making sure we look at the company, we look at the modality, we look at the phase of development, and we will recommend to clients to do certain things. And in consulting, you have to be able to tell the client what to do, why you need to do it as such, and how to do it.
Mm.
And so we're very action oriented when it comes to our interactions with our clients. And that all of our subject matter, every single one of them, they all have done BLAs and NDAs. They all have worked in pharma and biotech. So most, if not all of our subject matter experts have done multiple NDAs or multiple BLAs. So they really have hands-on experience with drug development.
When it comes to the development and the manufacturing in particular, how much of that would you say is with outsourced partners typically? How important is external manufacturing, would you say?
Well, extremely important. So if you look at our client base, we work with the largest of large pharma, and we also work with one person company and everything in between. And needless to say, a smaller company and a mid-sized biotech companies, they really manage their manufacturing using external partners, external CDMOs. Of course, large pharma uses external partners as well, but they have a lot of internal capacity. So we work very closely with over 250 CROs, CDMOs, CTL, CPL. So we have a global network of contract manufacturing, contract research, contract testing, contract packaging, and labeling sites that we work with. So we have deep expertise, again, because of our previous experience working with many of these external partners. And they play a vital role in the health of biotech and pharma industry.
Be interesting to get your perspective then on the current landscape of CDMOs, let's say, from a global perspective. We were in Boston a couple of weeks ago for our external manufacturing leaders event, and there we were talking to lots of biotechs on the East Coast, and they were talking about how they're still, despite the policy from the administration and Biosecure, still very reliant on using Chinese CDMOs. And we had an interesting conversation there about capacity in the US and the types of biologics work which China's good for. What's your view?
Yeah, I think you have to think about what is the right CDMO for the client that you have. And China, there's tremendous level of expertise, tremendous level of capacity in China that one could utilize. So if the program is early enough in development, I think Chinese CDMOs are terrific to work with, assuming they have the right quality and compliance standards in place. And people use the word China CDMO as if it was like one single entity. But of course, there are nuances. There are CDMOs in China that are terrific. We would have no issue using them for early stage, mid stage, late stage, or even commercial products. And then there's CDMOs in China that we would be hesitant to use. But the global CDMO has really evolved significantly. So if you look at 20, 25 years ago, most CDMOs were created from offshoots of large pharma. So large pharma had excess manufacturing capacity and they would sell that off to CDMO industry. But that is no longer the case. If you look at the technical, operational, and quality and compliance capabilities of many of CDMOs, they really are outstanding, especially for like novel therapies. So there's been an evolution of the CDMO industry.
Talking about the evolution of the CDMOs, how would you say that their use of AI and digitization has kept up over that time? Something that we hear a lot, particularly from the big pharma side, is some frustration that there isn't enough investment going into digitization. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think many of the CDMOs are going through what we call digital transformation, but the pace has been quite slow. We've done a lot of work in application of AI when it comes to manufacturing, quality and control, deviation management, deviation characterization. So there's a lot that you could harness with AI. I'm a big believer in AI, but I'm also a big believer in HI, which is really human intelligence. And you have to be able to combine AI with HI. So you really need both. To answer your question, I think CDMO industry, they're at the earlier stages of implementation of AI. And to me, it's a huge opportunity for them. But they have to be very thoughtful in the way that's implemented.
Thinking about the biotechs, which OCC advises. When it comes to CDMO evaluation and selection, are there any factors which, in your experience, they would typically overlook? And are there gaps between what the sponsor expects and the reality of the CDMOs?
Yeah, so I think a mistake that many smaller companies make when they think about CDMO selection, they do it based on price. So they would send out three, four RFPs, the RFPs come back, and they make a selection based on the price, where they really should make selection based on value. And there's many elements that go into value. Of course, price and cost are an important element of value, but you
Mhm.
have to make sure that the CDMO actually has the technical capabilities to execute on your program. Quality and compliance is something we have talked about. Project management. Time is really money. So speed to clinic, speed to market are really essential. So you really have to look at this collectively. But
Mhm.
having said all that, look, I think CDMO management is really an art.
Mhm.
And many smaller companies, they just don't have the internal expertise or the capacity to manage CDMOs correctly. And it's
Mhm.
really not the CDMO's fault. There's misalignment
Mhm.
between what the client needs are and what the CDMO can deliver. And companies like OCC, we can come in and basically level the playing field where there's good leadership engagement on the part of the CDMO as they work with smaller companies. I think one of the other things that smaller companies lack is leverage. They
Yeah.
have very low to no leverage when they work with large CDMOs. Again, we come in and we tend to level that playing field because we handle so many projects for so many clients. When we speak to CDMOs, they know that we have a deep understanding of what that interaction should look like. So
Mm.
we bring that leverage for many of our clients.
Okay. Is that a way then for small companies without the leverage, working with a large consulting group like yourself, that's a way to sort of get a bit more balance in the relationship?
Yes, I mean, that's one way. Of course,
Yeah,
I'm not here to sell our services. That's not my intention. There are other consulting
sure.
companies that they can work with, and they can hire people internally to augment what consultants are doing
Yeah.
for them.
How else could a small company do that? How can a small company make sure they're getting that leadership engagement from the CDMO side, that they're taking enough care of their baby molecules for them?
Yeah, I mean, the other way to do it is to get senior management engagement from the small company to the CDMO, making sure the CEO
Hmm.
or COO or the CFO of the smaller company is engaged and working with the CDMO. I think that level of engagement goes a long way. And then hiring some internal people who have deep expertise in CDMO management can also play a role. But none of those things really creates leverage.
Beyond obvious metrics such as timeline and quality, are there any other metrics which you'd advise tracking in terms of CDMO performance and indeed building into the contracts as well?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is you really have to be mindful about the work that the CDMO is doing to be phase appropriate.
Hmm.
What you don't want to do is start investing a lot into a project without having appropriate clinical outcome. So being phase appropriate in the way you do things is really important. And when you work with CDMOs, of course, they have, their heart is in the right place, but they're also a business. They're trying to create revenue. So
Hmm.
just balancing that revenue creation versus value creation for the client is really essential.
Yep.
But early on, it's all about speed to clinic.
Sure.
And later on, of course, you really need to make sure your manufacturing process is robust, scalable, and transferable.
Thinking about how much volatility there is in the world at large at the moment, what does resilient manufacturing look like right now? Because not everyone, of course, can afford to dual or tri-source. What strategies are there that you'd recommend for biotechs who want to de-risk their program?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to work with high quality CDMOs. Okay, so you
Mm.
cannot compromise on that. And you're absolutely correct. It's unrealistic to say you're a small biotech company with limited resources. Why don't you have basically redundancy at every node of the supply chain? It just doesn't work. You don't
Mm.
have the money and you don't have the internal capacity to manage that. So working with higher quality CDMOs is a good place to start and be mindful of the geopolitical issues that we're facing, but don't have any knee-jerk reactions. I think you always have to think about contingency planning beyond a paper exercise, but you also have to be realistic. You can also use CDMOs in the US that have had quality and compliance issues.
Sure. Going back to where we started the conversation about early stage biotechs using Chinese CDMOs, what typically would be your advice to them if they're not such an early stage? So maybe, I don't know, phase two, for example. Do you think that realistically it's probably would be the time now to tech transfer to a more domestic manufacturing? I mean, obviously every situation is different. What's your typical advice on that?
Yeah, so like intrinsically, there's nothing wrong with using Chinese CDMOs. Like I give you an example. If you're using Wuxi in China, Wuxi is an outstanding organization.
Mm,
They have very strong technical, very strong operational skills. Their quality and compliance is very good. They've been able to commercialize products in the US. So there's nothing wrong with using a highly skilled Chinese
mm,
CDMO. There's nothing wrong with that. Having said that, because of geopolitical issues, some large pharma, when they're looking to create partnership with a smaller biotech, they do want to have redundancy of that supply chain in the US. So
mm.
one thing we typically do for our clients, we may start in China, but as the program evolves and there's a higher degree of confidence in terms of clinical outcome, we start tech transferring some of the manufacturing processes to US.
Mm.
Like for example, if it's sterile manufacturing, we typically like to do sterile manufacturing in US or in Europe.
Yep.
Those are preferred sites. And if it's an ADC, we typically like to do the conjugation in US or Europe and start tech transferring those things out. But for oral products, like we would have no issue making drug products in China.
Mm, mm.
So it really depends on the modality
Sure,
itself.
sure.
But again, there are sterile manufacturing sites in the US that have had all kinds of quality and compliance issues.
Yeah. And capacity, obviously, in sterile manufacturing, there's a real crunch driven, I guess, in part by the ridiculous growth in the GLP-1 space. Sterile manufacturing is under so much pressure. How are you helping clients to navigate those capacity crunches, whether that's in sterile manufacturing or ADCs or whatever the area is?
So, I mean, there are three nodes of supply chain that are quite tight right now. One has to do with bioconjugation.
Mm,
Okay, so on ADCs, the bioconjugation step is quite tight. Second, as you correctly pointed out, is around sterile manufacturing. And lastly is around spray dry
yeah.
dispersion. Those are the three nodes
Mm,
that we see better of a crunch when it comes to capacity, especially high quality capacity.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
So with sterile manufacturing, I think planning early. You need to think about 24 to 36 months in advance in terms of supply chain planning.
Yep.
I think that's what we recommend to our clients.
I think everyone's hoping that biotech funding will improve in the year ahead, but generally, I think it's accepted that funding is at relatively low levels still. How has that changed how the type of clients you work with are approaching external manufacturing? Are they approaching contracts in a different way? What advice have you got to sort of navigate the drought?
Sure. We basically work with multiple VCs globally. We actually have more than 10 VCs that are our direct clients.
Hmm.
And when they do company creation, they pull us in to manage the CMC portion of the organizations that they're establishing. But I do want to talk to you about funding. Before I answer your question directly, I want to tell you something else.
Yeah.
I think the biotech industry has really evolved. And why it has evolved is because the Chinese biotech industry, not the CDMOs in China, but innovators in China are getting to answers faster and cheaper.
Hmm.
So in order for US and European biotech companies to compete in the same environment, they have to find ways to get to an answer, yes or no answer in
Yep.
terms of clinical outcome faster and cheaper. The way they could do it is two things. One is not to build these huge internal teams because it's very time consuming, it's very costly, and there's a lot of uncertainty about the organizational capacity and capability. So being able to work with external partners, either on finance, IT, CMC, ClinOps, and so on, it's an evolution that we're seeing. I think the second piece is when they work with CDMOs, because of the funding, they have to be able to dissect the work orders. And we spend a
Mm.
lot of time with our clients and CDMOs to start dissecting things. Like I'll give you one example. If you're doing an ADC project, we may have enough work for that CDMO around cell line development. And then the next scope of work would be around conjugation chemistry. So
Mhm.
we would start dissecting the work orders to minimize upfront costs. And then also making sure the cancellation fees are not overburdening. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things we're doing for our clients to make sure they're getting good value in the way they're working with CDMOs. But I think funding is an issue. We haven't
Mhm.
seen that in our business. Our business has grown month by month by month. We continue to expand. So we have not felt the impact of the funding. Eventually, I'm sure we will find that, there'll be impact on our business as well. But
Yeah.
for now, we have not seen that. But I
Yeah.
do know the funding has become tighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as such, I think biotech companies have to manage their work differently.
You talked there about the conjugation process and all the different lines. What's your experience been around, so-called one-stop shops who would do that versus working with multiple different suppliers? And I guess, is that a trade-off between cost versus simplicity? I mean, how do you generally tackle that issue?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do everything under one umbrella.
Mm.
But if you can, of course, it's preferable, especially when it comes to like quality system, contracts, and so on. It would simplify things, but it's really not a must. And now what we're also seeing, many CDMOs are creating interrelationships between themselves. Like there might be a really good conjugation site that is working with the sterile manufacturing, and they create business relationship to make
Mm.
it easier for the clients. But of course, if you could do many of the CMC supply chain nodes under one umbrella, it does make it easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Reza, preparing companies for regulatory interactions. With all the changes which have been happening at the FDA, what's your sense on how that regulatory environment shifting? What advice would you give to clients about getting IND ready in the current environment?
So I can only tell you about the scope of work we've done. So
Mm.
last year we helped 3 clients with their NDAs and 3 clients with their BLAs. And what we're seeing from FDA is actually very good quality work. We have not seen any impact in terms of some of the
Mm.
layoffs in FDA, some of the governmental changes, on the way the FDA is performing. So FDA is such an outstanding organization. So what we're seeing in terms of interactions with FDA has all been extremely positive. The same thing goes for INDs, IND amendments, IND updates. We haven't seen any negative impact of some of the changes in the US government. And the EMA is also a terrific organization
Yep.
to work with. And we see like really outstanding work coming out of EMA. Then like when we read a lot of the EMA reviews and we get day 80, day 120 questions, they're always very thoughtful.
Mm.
And our interactions with FDA have always been great.
There's a lot of interest at the moment in using AI to write regulatory submissions, and indeed at the FDA to have the AI read those submissions as well. Have you been using that? Have you been helping clients with sort of speeding up that whole process using AI?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some clients who have come to us that other regulatory companies have written things with AI, and the
Mm.
quality sometimes is questionable. I
Okay.
think AI can maybe get you the first draft, but not the final draft. And there's really an art to writing regulatory documents because you have to think about process scale up, tech transfers. So I'm not sure if AI is the right approach. I think AI can create a very simple draft for you, but you
Mm.
have to be very thoughtful in the way you put regulatory documents together.
The human intelligence piece that you mentioned.
Exactly. And really the human experience that says if I've written my regulatory document as such, what are the downstream ramifications if I have to do tech transfer, if
Mm.
I have to do scale up, if I have to do scale out. So, you have to be very thoughtful in the way you write those documents, in the way you write your specifications and acceptance criteria on the spec. And
Mm.
again, you have to be very phase appropriate.
Sure, sure. You mentioned earlier about how when it comes to managing external manufacturing, yeah, part of it's about picking the right CDMO to partner with, but it's also about at the sponsor side that they've got the right people who are project managing it as well. When you're working with an emerging biotech who's, let's say, they're entirely virtual and outsourced everything, what do they need in terms of personnel on those sides? Like, what's the right size of external manufacturing oversight from a biotech?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to have internal teams, then what they would need to have are really technical experts on drug substance, drug product, analytical, clinical supplies, QA, and QP, if they really want to have a
Mm.
internal team. But they also need to have external manufacturing expertise, people who know how to write contracts, people who know how to manage contracts, people who understand pricing negotiation. So you need all of those things. And that's what OCC brings for the client. Like we bring a full team of people for many of our clients who we manage their CMC end to end. And even if they have an internal team, a lot of times they come to us to manage their contract negotiations with
Yep.
CDMOs. We know what terms are appropriate, what terms are not appropriate. Typically, sometimes smaller companies go to attorneys, and attorneys are great in terms of reading a legal contract, but they may not have the technical expertise to know what are the true risks and risk mitigation strategies in a contract.
Mm.
And we basically complement internal attorneys in companies. But look, what you really need is deep technical expertise. I mean, I
Sure.
cannot underemphasize that.
Is it possible to entirely outsource that, or would an early stage biotech need to have some level of in-house oversight?
Yeah, I mean, we really have different models. We work with clients that are in phase three, going to commercial, and we manage their entire CMC end to end.
Mm.
There's nobody internally. And then we have clients that they have an internal team that we augment. I think both will work. It just depends on the nature of the executive team and what they feel comfortable with.
Yep.
I think either one of those work, but you have to work with highly qualified people externally.
Mhm. There's so much volatility in the world, which is directly impacting external manufacturing strategy. If we just sort of step back a bit, what would you say the biggest challenges or priorities are for biotech and pharma companies in the year ahead? Maybe we should talk about pharma because we've been talking quite a lot, I think, about biotech who want to move fast and get into the clinic. From a pharma point of view, what would you say the big challenges or priorities are?
I think what we see with a lot of pharma companies now is this desire to onshore manufacturing,
Mm.
either onshore or friendshore, friendshoring or onshoring. So you bring the manufacturing to US, to Europe, to Japan, to more friendly territories, or just manufacture in the US. I think that's a great aspiration for many large pharma companies. And I think I've seen up to like $250 billion worth of at least verbal commitment in terms of bringing manufacturing
Mm.
back to US, which is wonderful. Having said that, I mean, many of those companies have to make sure that they have the resourcing available to do so. I mean, to build out manufacturing is one thing. To staff those manufacturing sites with high quality individual, it's something else. So being able to manage those internal manufacturing capacities,
Mm.
it's going to be quite interesting to see.
Do you think there's a talent gap at the moment?
I believe there will be a talent gap
Mm.
once you start onshoring many of manufacturing. Yeah, I
Yep.
believe it's going to be a talent gap. Yes. I mean,
Mhm.
at some things you're not going to onshore. You're not going to onshore early stage, intermediate manufacturing for small molecules. That's just that. That's China. That's going to remain in China.
Mhm.
Um, I think the other challenge that I think large pharma will continue to have is becoming more and more efficient in the way they
Mm.
manage their work and being able to clearly develop their pipeline and de-risk their pipeline over time. What we see a lot right now is companies going to China to look for new modalities and new assets. I think
Mm.
that there's a great deal of innovation that is coming out of China and being able to manage that work. And for biotech, again, I hate to keep saying the same thing, but being able to become more efficient, get to an answer faster and cheaper so they could compete with Chinese biotech.
Yep.
If you look at the number of patents that US biotech companies used to file versus China, the ratio was 20 to 1.
Mm.
20 patents in US one in China. Now the ratio is almost 1 to 1.
Yeah. Interesting.
And like 80% of due diligences that we do for our VC clients, they're out of Japan, China, South Korea, Singapore.
Are you getting a lot more from investors who want to understand and dig into the CMC strategy in a way which maybe they didn't previously?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I think there was a list of all the CRLs that were published by the US FDA, and
Mm.
70% of complete response letters were due to CMC. I
Mm.
think that has been a big wake-up call for many investors, and now they're paying much closer attention to CMC, especially during the diligence process. Yeah.
Mm.
I've seen a shift where before it was all about clinical, and now it's really clinical and CMC fully integrated.
Which is positive, I guess, for the industry in de-risking everything.
I agree, and the modalities have become a lot more complex.
Yes.
Like the modalities have become complex, the supply chain has become complex. You constantly see higher and higher bar when it comes to quality and compliance from FDA and from EMA, which is, of course, it's exactly what we want to see. We want to see that bar to continue being raised. We want to make sure US consumers are getting the best quality products.
Reza, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. One final question. As you reflect on your career in life sciences, are there any moments that make you feel the most proud? It's an amazing industry to be in. Are there any particular things that spring to mind?
Sure, no problem at all. I mean, I was again very fortunate to work at Gilead Sciences for 28 years. Gilead is an amazing organization, incredible organization. I was lucky enough to work on many of the HIV products that Gilead developed
Mm.
and that HCV. But I would say maybe the proudest moment is when we worked on remdesivir for treatment of COVID. I
Wow.
mean, Gilead just, well, like what Gilead was able to do was truly remarkable. So we went from having 50,000 vials of remdesivir on hand to making 1 million vials a week
Mm.
within 6 months. So just think about the supply chain that we created during that time. And it was all during the COVID shutdown.
Mm.
And so it was remarkable. At one point, we were running like over 100 lyophilizers at the same time globally.
It's incredible, isn't
Yeah, it was really remarkable what Gilead management was able to accomplish. And I led the pharmaceutical manufacturing development for remdesivir. I was the lead. So I was just really proud for me to be able to work on that project.
it? It's incredible what happened under Operation Warp Speed over that time.
Yeah, and I think many companies, they were just so creative. You look at companies like Pfizer, with the COVID vaccine, Moderna. I mean, these companies just they did remarkable work. AstraZeneca, you name it. I mean,
Yeah.
the quality of work was remarkable, and it was done through CDMO network. So
Mm.
many of the CDMOs played a critical role, and they should be very proud of themselves.
With that in mind, I mean, what are your thoughts on what's happening with mRNA at the moment?
I mean, again, I think any of these technologies, they have they have certain areas that could be very helpful. That doesn't mean it could be helpful across the board. I think sometimes people overread into a certain technology. Yeah. But I think it's a valuable technology. They would have its own set of usage. We do a lot of work with the siRNAs. We do a lot of work with mRNAs. Again, for certain treatment options, I think they can be very helpful. Vaccines are really good examples. Yeah.
Yeah, it was proven, you'd think, beyond all doubt, over the COVID period, how valuable mRNA is.
Yeah. COVID was a very interesting time for everybody involved. Yes.
For the events industry too, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Shut everything down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Reza, absolute pleasure speaking to you today, and really looking forward to hearing you speak at CDMO Live Americas in October as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot by speaking to you. I look forward to seeing you in Boston.